All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to This Explainer. I want you to just close your eyes for a quick second and picture this. You're standing around a campfire. It's 50,000 BC. The sun just dropped below the horizon. There's no smartphone buzzing in your pocket, no streaming cues, definitely no emails to stress over. Just you, the flickering flames, and this thick, choking smoke blowing straight into your face, right? Well, somewhere way back in our ancient past, one of your ancestors got a lungful of that and thought, wait a minute, what if I did that on purpose? And that's exactly what we're looking at today, the genuinely mind-blowing, deeply ancient origins of smoking.
So the really big question we need to tackle right out of the gate is this. When did we actually start intentionally inhaling smoke? Because, here's the thing that gets completely misunderstood all the time. Smoking did not start with modern tobacco. It didn't start with colonial trade routes, and it didn't even start with the invention of farming. As we're going to see, the urge to inhale smoke is likely hardwired into us on a biological level that is so deep it literally predates human civilization. Crazy, right?
To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at the sheer monumental scale of our relationship with fire. I mean, before anyone could smoke anything, we had to have fire, right? And the oldest confirmed evidence we have of controlled fire? That's from 1 million years ago in Wonderwork Cave in South Africa. Think about that. 1 million years ago, we weren't even Homo sapiens yet. We were Homo erectus. And for hundreds of thousands of years, those early ancestors sat around fires every single day. They cooked, they kept warm, and they breathed in campfire smoke constantly. There was no avoiding it. It was basically the original air quality issue, and they were breathing it in daily, way before Columbus stumbled upon tobacco in 1492.
But here's where things get really interesting, because that smoke wasn't just your standard wood smoke. Whenever you burn wild organic matter, you're creating a massive chemical cocktail. Depending on whatever random brush or weeds our ancestors happened to toss into the flames, they were actually combusting plants that naturally released psychoactive alkaloids and terpenes. So, entirely without understanding the chemistry of what was happening, some of our ancient ancestors were accidentally getting high around the campfire. They were literally just trying to stay warm, but suddenly they felt, well, unexpectedly amazing.
And the reason that happened is because our biology was already completely primed for it. We humans have what's called an endocannabinoid system. It's this complex biological network with receptors just sitting there, waiting for these specific chemical compounds. They regulate our mood, our memory, our appetite. So when that very first human accidentally inhaled a lungsful of smoke from a burning psychoactive plant, their brain wasn't rejecting it. It was actually more like a biological handshake. The brain basically said, oh hey, I've been waiting for you. And that really pleasant accident, repeated over and over again, is almost certainly the true origin of smoking.
Which perfectly tees up this fascinating idea from psychopharmacologist Ronald Siegel, the intoxication hypothesis. Okay, so we all know the fundamental biological drives, right? Hunger, thirst, sex. But Siegel argues that intoxication, this innate drive to alter our own consciousness, is actually a fundamental fourth biological drive. And it's biologically embedded in animal behavior, not just human behavior. Get this, Siberian reindeer have been documented eating naturally hallucinogenic mushrooms, and then other reindeer will actually drink their urine because the psychoactive compounds pass through totally intact. Yeah, drug recycling reindeer in Siberia. If the drive to alter consciousness is that deep and that universal across the animal kingdom, it makes total sense that early humans deliberately sought out that campfire smoke once they figured out what it did to them.
Now, when we actually dig for hard, physical evidence of this, the timeline is just staggering. Back in 2019, researchers out in the Great Salt Lake Desert in Utah unearthed a hearth dating back 12,000 years. And right inside it, they found seeds from a wild tobacco species known as Nicotiana attenuata. And these seeds didn't just casually blow into the fire by accident. They were concentrated in a way that points directly to deliberate, intentional placement. Guys, this is 12,000 years ago, long before pottery, way before anyone was making pipes, and thousands of years before the dawn of agriculture. Our ancestors were actively out there collecting and burning tobacco.
And as we start moving forward into the historical record, we actually start getting written accounts of this exact behavior. Flashback to the 5th century BC, the ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote this incredibly vivid description of city and nomads out on the Eurasian steppe. He said they'd set up these small, enclosed tents, heat up stones until they were literally glowing red, and then just chuck hemp seeds right onto them. They'd take these intense vapor baths, and in his exact words, they were howling with pleasure.
Now, for centuries, historians read that and thought, okay, Herodotus is definitely exaggerating. But look at how this perfectly lines up. You've got his original account of vapor tents, hot stones, and hemp seeds, and then thousands of years later, modern archaeologists excavating actual Scythian burial mounds in the Pamir Mountains found bronze braziers, scorched stones, and the actual residue from cannabis plants that had an unusually high THC content. So Herodotus wasn't making it up or embellishing at all. He was just doing some rock-solid ancient journalism, reporting exactly what he saw.
Okay, so we know they were smoking to alter their consciousness, but that actually leads us to something that feels wildly counterintuitive today. Why on earth did ancient empires use smoke as medicine? Because obviously today, we strictly associate inhaling smoke with damaging our lungs, right? But ancient civilizations actually utilized inhaled smoke specifically to treat lung and throat conditions.
And the historical record on this is just incredible. Take ancient Egypt, right around 1550 BC. The Ebers Papyrus actually describes inhaling heated henbane smoke to soothe the throat and lungs. Over in ancient Greece, Hippocrates, the literal father of modern medicine, he prescribed inhaling herbal vapors to treat lung diseases. And in India, over 3,000 years ago, Ayurvedic medicine had this practice called dhumapana, which literally translates to smoke drinking. They used pipes to inhale medicinal herbs. And these weren't just improvised magic tricks. These were highly sophisticated, strictly regulated medical systems. The underlying logic was actually pretty brilliant. If a plant has pharmacological properties, then delivering it directly into your lungs via smoke is absolutely the fastest way to get it into your bloodstream. And honestly, that delivery method, inhaled medicine, is still very much alive today every time someone uses an asthma inhaler or a nebulizer.
But smoking wasn't just about medicine, and it wasn't just about a quick high. It was genuinely a matter of survival. It acted as this incredible form of early social technology. Humans are deeply, deeply social animals. For the vast majority of our evolutionary history, an isolated individual was a dead individual, while cohesive, tight-knit groups survived. So when a group of ancient humans sat together in a closed space, breathing in smoke and collectively entering an altered state of consciousness, modern neuroscience actually tells us that this synchronized their neural activity. It built immense group trust and mutual understanding. Sharing that ritual was literally the social glue, the infrastructure, that they absolutely needed to survive those incredibly dangerous prehistoric environments together.
So let's shift over to the Americas and see how this evolves into the story of tobacco. Way before European contact, indigenous tobacco use was considered profoundly sacred. It was viewed as a sacred messenger. They used it in intense healing rituals, for officially binding agreements between different tribes, and for opening up channels between the living world and the divine. The smoke itself physically traveled between worlds, carrying prayers up to the spirits and bringing visions back down. A shaman smoking tobacco wasn't just, stepping out for a casual 10-minute smoke break. It was a heavily disciplined, heavily controlled, and deeply revered spiritual act.
But then, the entire script flips, and the sacred quickly becomes the mass-produced. We hit 1492, Columbus arrives, and he encounters this indigenous smoking. His crew gives it a try, and within just a few decades, it completely sweeps through Europe. By the 1600s, it is a full-blown global trade obsession. The 1700s and 1800s usher in aristocratic snuff and widespread cigar smoking. And then finally, the 1900s bring us the modern, mass-market, industrially manufactured cigarette. So a deeply ritualistic practice that took indigenous Americans thousands of years to carefully develop was rapidly ripped out of context by European industrialists and transformed into a cheap, highly addictive global consumer habit.
And when you put them side by side, it really lays out the stark reality of that transition. On one side, you have a 500 BC shaman, completely focused on sacred rituals, communal bonds, and spiritual reverence. And on the other side, you have a 1960s tobacco executive, focused on engineered addiction, suppressing cancer data, and marketing directly to youth just to maximize corporate profit. They both worked with the exact same plant, delivering smoke to the lungs. But looking neutrally at the historical facts, their intentions could not possibly have been more radically opposed. It honestly represents one of the largest historical and moral chasms in all of human history.
So what does this all mean? Well, if there is one crucial takeaway from this whole explainer, it's this. The act of smoking is an unbroken thread that runs continuously through 100,000 years of the human experience. It predates agriculture, it predates pottery, it completely predates recorded civilization. It seamlessly connects the Egyptian physicians to the Scythian nomads to the Mayan shamans, all the way back to our earliest ancestors sitting around the fires of Wonderwork Cave. The specific plants definitely changed, and the purposes obviously changed. But that underlying behavioral drive, that was already incredibly ancient by the time anybody even thought to write it down. Which leaves us with this one final thought to chew on. The next time you find yourself sitting around a summer bonfire, or you just catch a quick whiff of wood smoke on a really cold, crisp night, Are you going to remember the million-year-old campfire that started it all? Because the truth is, when you breathe in that smoky air, you are actively participating in something profoundly ancient. You are just doing what humans have quite literally always done. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your curiosity burning.